Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for being here to help us elevate KC. It is my pleasure to get to introduce our keynote speaker, Clayton Reid. Clayton is the president and CEO of MMGY Global, the world's largest integrated marketing firm specializing in travel. Clayton is also one of the travel industry's top minds in destination marketing and strategic planning. Visit KC aligned with MMGY Global as our agency partner just 3 months ago. I'm excited about our partnership and proud that the world expert in travel marketing is the agency supporting the Visit KC team. MMGY Global and Visit KC are leading integrated marketing programs that support the growth of the convention and meetings market and drive inbound tourism to the entire Kansas City metropolitan area. Our first priority in elevating the brand perception of Kansas City in both regional and fly markets through targeted, integrated, and innovative marketing programs. This partnership represents new thinking, pioneering next practices, and a strategically led, always-on brand campaign. Together, we will capture the powerful momentum of our destination and tell our story to the world. Today, Clayton will share with us how a new class of traveler is changing the way we all approach tourism marketing, the millennial. Their habits are different, their priorities are different, and their spending power is something like we've seen never before, to the tune of $2.5 trillion. Yes, $2.5 trillion in 2015. So how can we go as a destination to shift our strategy to embrace this important audience? We went directly to the source, and we asked a few of Kansas City's best and brightest millennials to tell us how. Take a look at the video.
Kansas City is kind of on the hustle right now. Everyone's trying to do something and trying to go bigger and better.
It's become more of a home to me than really any place I've ever lived, including my hometown.
You're seeing a younger generation come in and they're not afraid to act on their ideas and collaborate with people. You're seeing new restaurants, you're seeing new businesses, you're seeing new events.
You know, I've got friends that are all over the country and they're all looking back at Kansas City saying, I'm sorry, what's going on and what am I missing out on?
You've got wine festivals, you've got beer festivals, you've got music festivals, you've got the Royals who are world champion.
There's just so much to do and there's so much variety. I feel like any which way you go on a street, you hit a different community.
There's a sense of our city against the others, just to kind of prove ourselves in a way.
Probably start with eating at a great restaurant and going down to the river market and going on to the shops down there.
I think Kansas City is so special because of the culture. It truly is just a hidden gem in the Midwest.
You know, the ability to be somewhere pretty quickly, but also just the ability to connect with whoever you want to and kind of make something happen.
People my age, they are looking for the exploration part of travel.
You want to do the mainstream stuff and then like hit the back roads and see what the city's like, get down to the nitty gritty. I don't really think oh, I want to go to this specific place. It's more the town on a whole I want to experience.
The biggest thing I look for is the culture. I think just being someplace where everyone's really welcoming and inviting helps the experience.
I think we're becoming more emboldened to be like, yeah, we are champions. Yes, this is a great place to live. No, we are not a flyover state. Like, you are missing a diamond in the rough if you pass on Kansas City.
Please join me in welcoming President and CEO of MMGY Global, Clayton Reid.
Good afternoon. First of all, we've built our company by going around the world and talking to communities about what they need to do from a tourism standpoint. So it's a great privilege for me to be here in my own community with colleagues and friends. I feel it's really a great honor. And I've been involved in the CVA a very long time. And I have to say, I'm more proud of my association with this organization now today than I have ever been. The things that Ronnie and his team are doing are amazing. Who in this room considers themselves or believes they're a millennial? Raise your hand if you think you're a millennial. Yeah, so I would argue three things about that, right? One, you're not really sure how to define a millennial. 2, you're not a millennial, but you want everybody to think you are, right? Or 3, you resent the fact that you are a millennial and everybody casts you in one bucket, right? I would argue those are the things we want to talk about today. So the theme is, how is the millennial mindset playing to our advantage in Kansas City, not necessarily just about the millennial. I moved to this city in 1985. I moved here from Colorado, and I can remember thinking, finally, I'm moving to a city where they win sports championships. We hadn't won anything in Denver forever. And sure enough, the first year I was here, one of the greatest hitters in baseball history and one of the greatest second basemen in Royals history led the team to a championship. I remember thinking, this is going to be great. And then my oldest son, or my grown-up son's waiting 20 years later for the next championship. Didn't bargain for that. And then it happened in 2015. And we talk about this, we talk about this as a metaphor for our community, and I absolutely believe it is. For one thing, I think sports is incredibly important in bringing a community together. But I also believe the things that have been happening over the last 10 years in this city have been mirrored by the Royals' rise. And I think it's okay to say that. I tell you that because I wanted to establish my cred as a Royals fan before I tell you a Boston Red Sox story. Anybody know who this is? Anybody want to yell out who this is? Ted Williams, next to George Brett, one of the greatest hitters in baseball history. Ted Williams is out at batting practice in Fenway one day, and he looks down at home plate, and he tells his teammates and the grounds crew that the plate's off by 1/4 inch. And they look down at that, and they tell him he's crazy. How could you possibly see that the plate's 1/4 inch off? Sure enough, they come out and measure, and it's 1/4 inch off. Why does that matter? Ted Williams did most of his damage down the left field line. 1/4 inch at home plate was 11 feet of fair territory in the left field line. 2 things. 1, small facts over time become big trends. That's an important thing to think about as I talk to you about some of this data today. Second thing, I think you have to put what I tell you today through your own filter. I think we make assumptions, we tell you data points, but you still have to filter that for yourself and decide how you want to use that. Facts can be deceiving. 1/4 inch is 11 feet. A millennial is 34, not 18. So keep that in mind as we go through this today. Our company is the largest researcher of travel in the United States, and we do 2 main things. We look at trip intent and trip demand, and we look at travel behavior, and we spend a lot of time trying to understand the millennial traveler. It's a big part of how we think about insights, and as Ronnie pointed out, it's a huge, huge spending market. But just so we all understand the context in which we play, the travel industry in the United States is one of the biggest industries we have on a GDP basis. And when you think about the amount of revenue that's being generated, the amount of jobs being created, it's incredibly important. And then when you take that same lens and think about Kansas City, if somebody asks you what you do, you tell them, I drive revenue into this community. That's what my industry does. Whether it's jobs, whether it's visitors spending tax money so we don't have to invest those tax dollars ourselves, it's a huge industry for us and a very important industry. And understanding a little bit about what's happening with the millennial mindset might help us squeeze out a little bit more revenue. It's a lot of jobs for us, our livelihoods depend on it. This is a look at travel demand since 2007. So a pretty good look over a longitudinal period of time. And you can see, looking forward, we're at the highest level of trip demand we've seen in a very long time. In fact, an historically high trend. We've been tracking this for 25 years. So the first good news today is that trip demand is significant. We expect a continued growth in hotel rooms, in airlines, in visitors over the long period of time. And today, it's particularly important to ask the question, when there's a bombing in Europe, or when a virus is spreading like Zika virus, does that have an impact on travel? And I can tell you we've studied this very carefully, and it does not. It sometimes has a short-term effect. It sometimes will change behavior in some slight ways, but there's no reason to believe that trip demand for Kansas City and for the United States in general isn't going to continue to be very high over a long period of time. So what's fueling this? Millennials are fueling this. If you look at total growth we expect in terms of trips, and then you look at where that's coming from, you can see millennials are driving it versus the other age cohorts. So there's no doubt that we have to understand what's going to turn a millennial on when we talk about our own product, when we talk about our community, because millennials are a market maker. In fact, it's no secret. Marketers are going to spend 5 times more money trying to attract millennials to their products than every other age group combined. So in that it's no secret, millennials are important, I think it's very important to understand the nuances about millennials. They are not, as I said earlier, a monolithic group. Millennials have different thoughts about politics, different thoughts about travel. They're not one group, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Lots of people like to talk about Apple as an example of a great American company, and I think it's perfectly appropriate to do so. And a lot of people give Steve Jobs credit for inventing great products and for building products that we all want to use. My contention is Steve Jobs' great brilliance was in understanding his core customer. He didn't develop products for anybody other than who he viewed to be his customer. And when you think about marketing to a millennial mindset, I think you have to think about that you're being true to what a millennial really wants in today's day and age. So, just who are millennials? The oldest of millennials were born in 1981. So if you were born in 1980 and tried to raise your hand earlier, sorry. The youngest were born in 2001. It's a big group. This group, though, as I said earlier, is a bifurcated group. This group lived through VCRs and streaming content. They lived through boy bands and Pokemon, right? They've lived through a transformative time based on their age. They also have lived through one of the most dramatic technological changes in human history. If you think about what's happened with the inception of the internet and the things that have changed between 1981 and today. And it's actually one of the points about the Royals. You know, when the Royals were winning championship in 1985, I was a millennial-age person, but the things that have happened in the ensuing 30 years have certainly changed the way younger people today perceive the world. Even 9/11, and the research we do and others do, was a transformative moment for people of that age, and it drives a lot of their thinking, especially about travel. So as I said, it's the largest group in the United States, not only just in terms of individuals, but even in your own workplace. Millennials are the largest group in the workplace today now, making up 1/4 of the population. And there are sort of 4 truths that we see emerging that are important, I think, for our discussion. First, they're clearly mobile, and they always want to be accessible, and they always want to access others. Video is a key part of the way they think, the way they consume. Anytime, anywhere, and anybody, especially when it comes to online behaviors. And then an item that's a little more specific to our world, they're saying they want to get out into the middle of the country. They want to travel in ways that I think sometimes aren't fully understood when you define millennials in more of a stereotypical way. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Always on the go. Millennials will always be available online. It is the first thing they do when they wake up in the morning, they check their device. It's the last thing they do at night. There are studies now dealing with the fact that young people sleep with their devices and aren't sleeping as well as a result. If you have young kids, you might realize that they have their phones next to their pillows when they sleep at night. It's because they have this incessant will to be connected. And that's a really very important part of their makeup. If you think they're always working in your workplace, you're wrong. That's a stereotype for sure, and I don't believe that it's necessarily true of just millennials. In fact, I know it's not. But what you have to understand, and there have been studies done about this, if you don't allow young people to connect online, not just in this way, but in their social environments where they're spending almost 2 hours a day, they actually are more disrupted. They're more stressed out. They feel isolated. If there is a hallmark of 18 to 34-year-olds today, it is that social behavior is unabashed. They want to share everything they do online, and they're not shy about it. It is their window to the world. It is the way they want to communicate and learn, and it's the way they want to communicate from others, whether they're at work or whether they're at home or whether they're traveling. This may be a hard chart to see, but this is the number of times different age groups check their phones a day, which to me is staggering, especially at those younger age groups. And you can see the incidence lessen as people get older. But I can remember when my kids were in school, when they first got into school and the phones were just becoming a part of their everyday life, schools would not allow them to have phones out. They would be taken away if they were used. Today in school, they're used. They're out commonly during class because it is a part of who they are. It is a part of the way they behave. And recognizing that, I think, is very important. I mentioned video all the time. So again, the way millennials want to learn and communicate is now increasingly about using video to do it. 92% of millennial internet users are using a video viewer. That's not just about consuming entertainment. That's about social, Snapchat videos. It's about short-form content, YouTube and other venues. It is the way they talk. It's not as much about photographs or written text now as it is about video representing a point of view. And that is now pervasive in this age group and very important to understand. And its effect, of course, is how people are now watching TV. If you look at younger millennials, less than half of them are watching TV in a traditional way. Older millennials are still over half. But nevertheless, there's been a move away from traditional TV watching, and we think that will continue. So who's the poster child for that behavior? Who's probably gained the most in the marketplace around that kind of behavior? Anybody want to take a shot?
The continued winner, Netflix, adding 6 million streaming members in the fourth quarter, bringing its global subscriber base to 75 million. That's right, more people are streaming Netflix than live in the United Kingdom. This year, people spent 43 billion hours watching Netflix. Netflix now accounts for an astonishing 37% share of all North American internet traffic. In sum, the internet is Netflix plus a bunch of other fun stuff.
Right? So Netflix is the predominant platform, and it's an endemic now of this cord cutting that's going on. The cable companies and the satellite companies are going to struggle to hold on to market share. Slingbox, Hulu, Netflix, and others are beginning to own the younger consumer and the older consumer. And we see that continuing to happen, that this cord cutting is going to take place. Google Fiber in our own community is changing that right here. Right, Rachel? So it's important to understand that cord cutting is going on and that the way people consume is going to continue to evolve quite a bit, and the younger generation has driven that. All right, how about this notion that millennials are on the go all the time? Last year in the United States, over 1 billion vacation days went unused. A lot of us can relate to that. But don't blame millennials. Millennials take their vacation days and they use them to travel. Almost 7 in 10 took a weekend trip in the last year. Half of them are taking a last-minute trip. So I don't know if you're familiar with some of these last-minute web tools for travel now, like Hotel Tonight. The onset of these kind of distressed inventory tools are being driven by this last-minute trip occasion. Millennials take a lot of their trips at the last second. They don't feel a need to plan in advance. 44% of millennials travel with other couples or in groups. And to my point earlier, I actually had a group of older millennials stay with me last week. Ivy League educated, Portland living hipsters. They were driving across the country and visiting small communities in the middle of the country. After they left me, they were on their way to Hamilton, Indiana, because they'd heard about this little town there that they wanted to shop in. It's a big part of the way they're thinking about the authenticity and genuine experiences you can get in travel today. And this, to me, is one of the most important and interesting facts about millennial travelers. They will travel by themselves. There is only one other country in the world where this is true, and that's Japan. In Japan, it's considered a rite of passage to travel when you're young by yourself in more of a nomadic travel pattern. We're seeing by far in the millennial set an interest to do that, more than double any other age group. We're actually working with a destination spa right now who's interested in looking at this market specifically because they want to tap into it. The last thing I want to say in this respect is about mobile usage and mobile pay. Google Wallet, Apple Pay, Square, these are all payment platforms that are growing very rapidly. Millennials were the first to really adopt that, and it's becoming, again, more pervasive. It's led a lot of people to suggest around mobile behaviors and how they're redeeming points in loyalty programs to suggest millennials are not loyal customers. And I want to use this chance to dismiss that. There is no evidence at all that young people are not loyal. There's evidence to suggest young people don't yet know which brands they want to be loyal to. And when you talk about mobile pay, a very interesting characteristic of young consumers is they don't want to hoard points in a loyalty program. They want to redeem them instantly. I like to collect points for as long as I can so I can redeem them for that big trip. Millennials like to use those points as point-of-sale redemptions for things as small as milk and for things as big as furniture purchases. But mobile pay is allowing that to become more of the way in which loyalty points are redeemed, and we expect that to continue. This is sometimes, I think, the stereotype of a millennial. Big beard, single-track bike, dressed in an eclectic way. And as I said earlier, I think that's totally unfair. Millennials certainly are nomadic. They'll live in a microbus, sleep on a couch. They want to go experience things off the beaten path. But millennials are also families that have much different views. A 30-year-old millennial is very different than a 19-year-old millennial on all sorts of issues, and including travel. I have a different worldview. So both are important, but as I said earlier, it's very important to understand it's not monolithic. You have to think about millennials in different ways if you want to connect with that entire age group. For one thing, they're going through something very transformative. From the time they're 18 to the time they're 34, they may be waiting a little longer to get married, but when they get married, that changes a lot, right? Just like it does when they have kids in their household. That's a transformative thing. Think about a millennial going from student in the household to college student to first-time job to married to having kids. That bifurcates how these guys think about the world, as it did for all generations. Family millennials spend almost twice what couples millennials spend, which makes sense. So don't think about millennials just as young consumers. Think of them as family consumers willing to spend more. And goodness, I hate to have the staycation come back. You remember that after 9/11, the staycation was how everybody marketed themselves, close-in radius travel. Well, guess what? Especially older millennials want to do staycations. They want to travel closer to where they live. They seek out authentic experiences closer to their roots. So even that is a bit counterintuitive. And then the last thing I'll talk to you about with regard to millennials that I think is counterintuitive is something we've talked a lot about in our research. Millennials use bricks and mortar travel agents more than any other age group in the United States, which is totally counterintuitive, right? Technology savvy millennials are using bricks and mortar travel agents. Why would that be? Well, there are two reasons. One, a lot of young millennials in particular want to go to places that are off the beaten path. And two, they don't have a lot of experience doing it. So they want to have a third party help them through those decisions. And they can't do that entirely online. So just one little example of where you can't always believe that fact as being truth unless you dig into it a little deeper. So the next big point I want to make is this whole idea about millennial mindset. The millennials are setting a stand for the way we think that older generations are following. Brandon Roten spends a lot of money for Wendy's in the ad community. And he's talking a little bit about what I mentioned earlier with regard to how millennials watch TV, but he's getting at a bigger point here, which is older consumers are adopting the attitude of millennials. And a lot of that is this idea of experiences. I want to feel young even if I'm not. That's why some of you who are 50 raised your hand when I asked you if you were a millennial. And that's important to understanding the mindset of a traveler who may not be a millennial. In the 80s and 90s, that generation collected things: cars, jewelry, art, expensive clothes, big houses. Not that that still doesn't happen, but there is now a focus on collecting experiences. 83% of people we polled said that collecting experiences is more important than collecting things. We in the travel industry, that is our business. That is how we get at that mindset. We help people find these experiences. And in Kansas City particularly, when you look at the commonalities of the things that the millennial mindset seeks, we have all the best of those things. So when we talk about elevating Kansas City, and you look at the percentages of people who want to do the things that we do, that's great news for us. And when you talk about millennials, you might expect that film, music, and art festivals would be at the top of their list. It's not. They want to have authentic experiences around the arts and around history. That's a consistent theme that's in this millennial mindset. Airbnb. Anybody used Airbnb? If I'd asked you that question 3 years ago, very few hands would have gone up. It would have been a bunch of young people who started adopting this. Airbnb was created by very young millennials for very young millennials. It now has a market cap far larger than Marriott hotels. Why? Because VRBO, as we know it in the travel industry, has been around a long time, but Airbnb and the younger traveler made it cool again. They made it cool to stay in somebody else's house. And so in 2014, when we asked millennials, had they tried a shared accommodation, 25%, a fourth of them said yes, and 80% said they'd do it again. We asked the same question of Gen X. The numbers weren't that far beneath it. That generation wants to do it too. Would it surprise you if I told you that boomers, older travelers, are using shared car service at 3 times the rate this year than they will of last year? Shared services in the travel and transportation industry is something that millennials started, a mindset that has carried over to older generations. So just like I showed you that stereotypical photo earlier of a millennial, we can't make the mistake of applying stereotypes to older travelers. This is my homage to the Grand Budapest Hotel. Mature travelers are not this traveler today.
I want to do the mainstream stuff and then like hit the back roads and see what the city's like, get down to the nitty gritty. I don't really like think like, oh, I want to go to this specific place. It's more the town on a whole I want to experience.
So what Julia said there is not all that different than what we hear from older travelers. This is a generation that is younger than they were 10 years ago as they get older. They're more active than they were. They have a lot of disposable income. There will be over 1 billion matures in the world by 2020 with a lot of discretionary time and a lot of discretionary money. And they are adopting the mindset of millennials. I want to get out there. I want to collect experiences. Tapping into that mindset is really important for us because there's some truth to this. It's cool to be old. And I'm not sure all millennials would cop to this. They don't want a lot of old people at their favorite bar, but the older generation wants to be there, trust me. So I think, what I'd summarize is this. We're in a great position to capitalize on this mindset. Kansas City has created an environment, an attitude, and a product that taps very well into what I've been talking to you about today. So as we think about it, we have to think about some of these characteristics that we can take advantage of. And this is one of my favorite photos I've seen maybe ever in sports, right? Probably most of you have seen this. But I'm never tired of using the Royals as a metaphor, by the way. If you think about Hosmer standing on third base, and that ground ball to first, he's sitting there thinking, all right, there's an opportunity here. I'm going to have to take a calculated risk. There's an opportunity I'm going to take advantage of, and sure enough, he did it. I think that's a perfect metaphor for what's going on in our community. We are seeing an unprecedented level of development, which takes calculated risk. We're seeing product and attitude emerge in this community. We're seeing young people move into this community that are creating a vibe we've never had before. And we're in a great position to take every advantage of that. Thank you very much.